We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph and Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 36a. And the previous summit, the Gemara was dealing with the part of the Mishnah which said that the shemen, the oil of Ovdei Kochavim, of idol worshippers, is prohibited. And the Gemara brings a machlokas amoraim in this regard. Rav says that when it comes to the shemen of Ovdei Kochavim, that was prohibited by a decree made by Daniel, presumably because of chasnus, because of intermarriage. And Shmuel says the reason why the shemen of Ovdei Kochavim is prohibited is because zlifosan shalkelim tameim osarton, the secretions of vessels which are tamei, they make it prohibited. And what Shmuel means to say over here is that there's actually food that is tamei within the walls of these vessels, and that's making the shemen, that's making the oil tamei, and that's the issue. But the Gemara says, Atu kuli alma ochle taharos ninu, but does everybody eat only food that's pure? There's no halacha that you have to eat food that is tar. You could eat food that is tamei. People who are extra careful, maybe they're going to eat food that's tar. Maybe when there are things like truma, so you have halachas that it can't be tamei. But in general, you can eat food that's tamei, so that can't be the reason why shemen of Ovdei Kochavim is prohibited. And so the Gemara revises Shmuel, Ella rather zlifosan shel kelim asurin osartan. It's the secretions of vessels which contain within in them food that is prohibited, food that is not kosher. That's what makes the shemen osur. That's what makes it prohibited. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Shmuel le Rav. Shmuel said to Rav, Bishlomo l'didi, it works well according to me, Da'amino az lifosan shel kelim asur no sartan, that I say that the reason is because the secretions of prohibited vessels, that's what makes them prohibited. Hainu d'chiyasa Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marasa. That explains that when Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marasa came, V'yomer, and he said, Doresh Rabbi Simloi ben Etzivin, that Rabbi Simloi darshan in Etzivin, shemen, that when it comes to oil, Rabbi Yehuda in the Mesoras Hashah says, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Ubezdino nimnu olavihitiruhu. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, in his court, they voted upon it and they actually said that the shemen really should be mutter. So I can explain that because he holds no sein tam lifgam mutter, that let's say it's adding taste, but it's taste that's detrimental. When you have the food that's added from the walls of the vessel, it's not giving any benefit, it's not giving any beneficial taste to the oil. It's no sein tam lifgam, and so therefore he holds no sein tam lifgam is mutter, and that's why it poses no problem. So therefore Shmuel says I can explain that, it works according to me. But according to you, Rav, the Amrit Daniel Gazar Olav, that you say that Daniel made a decree that the shemen of Ovdei Kochavim is prohibited. So Daniel Gazar V'Yosr Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Umevat, is Daniel going to make a decree and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is going to come along and nullify the decree? It's not possible. But we learned in the Mishnah, Ein Bezdin Yochol Levatel Divrei Bezdin Chaver, that one court is not able to nullify the words of another court, Ela Imkein Gadol Heimenu B'Chachmo V'Minyan, unless it's greater in wisdom and in number, and so therefore it would be impossible for Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi to undo the decree of Daniel. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said to him, Simloi, you're quoting me something, this is Dorish Rabbi Simloi ben Etzivin, you're quoting me something from Simloi Ludo Ka'amrit, are you telling me something from Simloi who was from Lud? Rashi notes, Ludoi mizalzali b'midei d'Rabbanan, they would disparage the words of the Rabbanan. You're bringing me a proof from there. Shani Ludoi d'mizalzlu, again those who are from Lud, they're different because mizalzlu, because again they disparage. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, Eshlach Lei, so he said, okay, should I send a message to him to find out if this really happened, meaning to confirm that it really is true that Rabbi Yehuda's Bezdin came along and they undid it. And when he said that, so at that point, Rav became embarrassed. But the Gemara continues, Amar Rav says, Im heim lo darshu, but if they didn't make that drasha, meaning, if Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi didn't make the drasha, anon lo darshinan, should we not make the drasha? Meaning to say Rav's about to bring a proof from the pasuk that it is true that Daniel made the gezerah. V'aksib, but it's written in the pasuk, there's a pasuk in Sefer Daniel, Vayosem Daniel alibo asher yisgoel bepas bag hamelech uveyein mishtav. It says in the pasuk that Daniel was not going to partake from the bread of the king, and it says uveyein mishtav, from his wine, but mishtav is plural. Bishtei mishtos hakosem medaber, talking about two different kinds of drinks. Echon mishtei yayin ve'echon mishtei shemen. It's talking about the wine and also the oil, and so you see that Daniel in fact did make the gezerah against the oil of Ovdei Kochavim. And the Gemara continues and explains, Rav holds al libo sam, that what the pasuk means is that Daniel put this al libo on his heart, ulechol Yisrael hora, but also furthermore, he also issued a ruling for all of Klal Yisrael. Ushmuel savar, and Shmuel holds al libo sam, it was upon his heart. However, ulechol Yisrael lo hora, but he did not necessarily issue the ruling for all of Klal Yisrael. And Rashi explains, Im heim lo darshu, if they didn't make the drasha, meaning, Im Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi lo darash as hamikra, if Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did not darshan the pasuk in Daniel, lohavin she Daniel gazer alav, to understand that Daniel made the gezerah, v'savar, and let's say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds the veidina achrina gazer alav, that a different bezin made the gezerah, mishum zlifas kelim, because of the reason that you gave the secretions of vessels, v'sharia, and then he came along, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi came along and permitted it. But anan lo darshinan bitmiya, but we shouldn't make the drasha. In other words, we find it in the pasuk, and therefore Rav said, even if it's true that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi understood that way, I'll bring you a proof from the pasuk. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'shemen Daniel Gazar, is it really true that it was Daniel who made the decree on the shemen of Ovdei Kochavim? V'omar Bali Omar Avimai Nifsa Mishmei Derav, but Bali said that Avimai Nifsa said in the name of Rav, Piton v'shamnon yenon uvnosehen, their bread and their oil, their wine and their daughters, meaning the bread, the oil, the wine, and the daughters of Ovdei Kochavim, kulon mishmona asr davarhein. All of those were decrees that were part of the 18 decrees from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And so therefore it doesn't seem to have come from Daniel, it seems to have come from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. V'chiteimen, if you're going to say also Daniel Gazar v'lo kibel, that Daniel came, he made the gezerah, but it wasn't yet accepted. V'yasu talmidei de Hillel v'Shammai v'Gazar, and then the students of Hillel and Shammai came and they made the gezerah v'kibel and it was accepted. But if so, mayasadu say the Rav. So what exactly was the testimony of Rav? Rashi explains, Shemona Asr Davar, the 18 things, Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel Yachad Nimnu v'Gazru Aleim. There are 18 gezerahs over there, the Parakam the Shabbos, in the first parak of Shabbos, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel they voted on and they decreed. Well, the Kamon Parach, the Gemara later will ask, Beno Sayin, what do you mean their daughters was a decree from Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? Doraisi, that's actually Doraisi, you can't be with their daughters. And the Gemara says, Maya Sadusei de Rav, if you're going to suggest that it simply wasn't accepted at the time of Daniel. So what was Rav saying? Da'amar de Daniel Gazar Olav, that he said that Daniel made the Gezerah. Kevon de Dore lo kabel minei, if the generation didn't accept it in his time, so Lav Gezerah, that's not called a decree, and so therefore that wouldn't really explain anything. You can't say that Rav meant to say that Daniel made the Gezerah and it wasn't accepted, because such a Gezerah is not even called a Gezerah. And so the Gemara instead revises as follows, rather, Daniel Gazar Olav Ba'ir. Daniel did make the Gezerah, but he applied the Gezerah in the city. V'yasuinu v'Gazar afilu b'sad, and they came along and they made the Gezerah even in the field. Again, the idea is that if it has to do with chasnus, if it has to do with intermarriage, so he originally made that Gezerah specifically in the city. There's more issues of intermarriage over there, and then they came along and they made the Gezerah, meaning Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, they came along and made the Gezerah even in the field. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi hechi motzi lemishra takanta de talmidei Shammai v'Hillel. But if you're going to say that, how could Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi have come along and permitted a takana of the students of Shammai and Hillel? Vatzanan, but again we learned in the Mishnah, ein bezin yachol levatel divrei bezin chaver, one bezin, one court is not able to nullify the words of another court, elam ken gadol heimenu b'chachma v'minyan, unless it's greater in wisdom and number. V'yod, and further, Hamar Rabbi Bar Rachana, Hamar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Bar Rachana said that Rabbi Yochanan said, b'chol yachol levatel bezin divrei bezin chavero. In all situations, one court can nullify the words of another court, chutz mishmona asar davar, except for the 18 decrees with Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, shafilu yavo Eliyo Beis Dino, that even if Eliyo and his court would come, ein shomen lo, we would not listen to him with regards to those. So again, how is it possible that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi could come along and nullify this decree again if it came from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel of the Yud Ches Davar? And the Gemara says, Amar of Mesharshir says, Matam, what's the reason? Meaning to say, what's the reason that you're not able to nullify the Shmonas or Davar, the Yurches Davar? Ho'elu Pashat Isuro B'rov Yisrael. It's simply because the Isser, the prohibition, has become widespread among Klal Yisrael. But Shemin, when it came to the oil, Lo Pashat Isuro B'rov Yisrael, that didn't spread through the majority of Klal Yisrael, and therefore it was not a problem to undo it. The Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Shmuel bar Abba said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Yashua Rabbeinu Uvadku, our rabbi sat and they examined Al Shemen with regards to oil, Shalo Pashat Yisuro B'rov Yisrael, that the prohibition did not spread through the majority of Klal Yisrael. V'samchu Rabbeinu Al Divrei Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and our rabbis relied on the words of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, V'al Divrei Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, and also the words of Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Shahayu Omrim, that they said, Ein Gozrin Gezeira Al Tzibur, you can't make a decree on the community, Elim Kein Rov Tzibur Yecholin unless the majority of the community is able to stand that gezerah. And so therefore over here you see that the Rov Tzibur did not accept the gezerah, and therefore ein gozrun such a gezerah, you can't make such a gezerah on the community. And the Gemara continues, Damar Avodah Barava, because Avodah Barava says, my crow, what is the pasuk? And Rashi explains again, Bo'ir, he made the decree originally in the city Misham Chasnos because of intermarriage. B'chol yochol levatel bezin gzeres bezin chavero. In all situations, the court can nullify what another court said. Shegazer al davar hamutter, which let's say there was a gzer made on something mutter. Uvilvad shehei gadol mimenu, just that it has to be that second court is greater than the first court. Rabbi Seinu refers in the Gemara to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. It refers to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and that is a reference to the line in the Gemara, V'samchu Rabbi Seinu. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi relied, again, on the words of Rav Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok with regards to Ein Gozer and Gezer Al Tzibor, Le'imkein Rov Hatzibor, Yechol and Lamod Ba. And Rashi continues, Lo Pasha, it didn't spread, Adayin Lo Hechziku Rubam Ba'osa Gezerah, the majority didn't start to act in accordance with that Gezerah, Linog Ba'o to conduct themselves with regards to it in terms as if it was a prohibition. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Beis.